Jaya Shriman Narayana. Om Hri Om. Good. Namaste, everyone. It is absolutely my pleasure to be here with you today. And what we are going to be doing today is we're going to be continuing with our explanation of the Purusha Sukta. As people know, for the last several sessions, we have been going through this very, very important hymn that comes directly from Rig Veda, and it is from the 10th mandala. There are 10 mandalas, or sections, chapters you could call them. There are various translations for what they're called, but they're called mandalas. There are 10 of these mandalas within Rig Veda. This is from the 10th one, and specifically it's from chapter 90. And as we've said thus far in the past, when you look at the totality of Rig Veda, and let me first of all tell people this once again, just remind people of this fact, because people will sometimes ask me, ask members of the ISTS, oh, what is a good translation of Rig Veda? It is almost impossible to come across a good translation, unfortunately. The reason why this is the case is because of quite a few reasons, actually. First of all, Rig Veda, as is true for all the 4 Veda Samhitas, is not written in what we today would call standard Sanskrita, what is called classical Sanskrita. I say what we would call today, because of course 5,000 years ago it was Vedic Sanskrita that was considered the standard. Classical Sanskrita is a little bit different. But in any case, it's written in a different form of Sanskrita that makes it especially difficult. You need to understand what are the grammatical differences and as far as accent, etc. in Vedic Sanskrita versus classical Sanskrita. To be a Sanskritist in general is extremely difficult. It takes really decades of study. To then understand Vedic Sanskrita to the point where you can translate from that is even more difficult. I'm fortunate that I do know both. I know classical as well as Vedic Sanskrita, but again, it's very difficult to translate from the Vedic Sanskrita. That's the first problem. The second problem is that even more recent translations, meaning literally in the last 10 years, and there have been several, in the last 10 years, 20 years, something like that, they themselves, and I see this because I've read several of them, not in the entire translation, but I've looked through them, and I could see that they base many of their even more recent translations upon much older translations, meaning from the 19th century. And I can see that there are many presuppositions that are there as a result of this. So there is, these are all very faulty translations. The other problem, of course, is that even the understanding of what is meant by Vedic, what is it that is Vedic, is something that unfortunately a lot of people, even to this day, have a lot of difficulty with. People don't quite understand what is meant by Vedic. They'll take this term Vedic in either a purely academic sense, on the one hand, which is a very strict understanding, but a wrong understanding. But it's a strict understanding nonetheless. Otherwise, they'll go in the opposite direction, where their understanding of Vedic, quote unquote, is so broad, so general, that basically anything that is claimed to be Vedic, even by some person who started studying Vedic things 5 years ago, anything that is called Vedic is accepted as Vedic. This includes New Age concepts. This includes a lot of neo-Hindu concepts, meaning concepts that have crept into Hinduism in the last 200 or so years, etc., etc. And thus, when people try to translate as complex a work as, especially Rig Veda, many of these, again, presuppositions come in. And when that is the case, i.e., when you are viewing through the eyes of anachronism, i.e., you are trying to translate a work that existed thousands of years before Christ. Thousands, tens of thousands of years before Christ. But you're trying to understand this from, again, a contemporary perspective. Well, that leads to a lot of misunderstandings, even in your translation. Because, again, the Rig Veda is a work that is indeed extremely complicated. Even if an individual comes to this task from the viewpoint of, let's say, modern religious studies, even good modern religious studies, let's say following in the footsteps of someone like Mircea Eliade, people like this who are a little bit more conservative and traditionalist, even then you end up having a lot of anachronistic problems as far as ideology and worldview, which then colors your translation. So I'm going a little bit maybe too deeply into this, but so that people understand that indeed, I understand Rig Veda very well. I've read it multiple times. And again, in the Vedic Sanskrita, as well as in what little translations are out there. But indeed, there are no really good translations that are available to this day. A good translation will become available. It will be created by the International Sanatana Dharma Society at some point in the future, where we will have teams of individuals who are both academic scholars on the one hand, but also devotees who understand the spiritual foundation of the Rig Veda. But all that being said, what we're studying is indeed from the Rig Veda. It's the 10th mandala. And what we're going to be doing now is we're going to be going into what is indeed a rather esoteric aspect of the Purusha Sukta, and an aspect which, sadly, like almost all of the Purusha Sukta, has been misunderstood by 99%, and I'm being conservative, I'm trying to be charitable. 99% of individuals who comment on this section, so starting from the 6th verse and going on for quite some time, at least 10 verses or so, very few people have had the ability to understand what is being said here. Well, we will shed some light on this. Let me just say this before we dive in, actually, and this will help as far as then going through the actual verses that we're going to look at. What the preceding verses speak about is what is called yajna. Yajna. Now, people have heard this term yajna, and many people have a somewhat good understanding of what is meant by this term yajna. What is meant by the term yajna? Well, of course, for most people, when we hear the term yajna, we understand it in the literal sense. We understand it especially in the contemporary sense. And in this case, when I say contemporary, I'm talking about hundreds and hundreds of years. And it tends to be a fire ritual. This is what most people think of when they hear the term yajna. Now, is this incorrect? No, it's not. It's not incorrect. Indeed, this is the most outward form, the most outward manifestation of what is meant by this term yajna. The term yajna itself has several translations. Some people translate it as sacrifice. That's not incorrect. Some people will translate it as, sacred ceremony, etc. So there are several ways in which this can be translated. However, I need to go into this a little bit. Again, for people who are familiar with Vedic things, when they hear the word yajna, they tend to think of the actual ritual that is done, which you've seen me do yajna here in the temple. We have quite a few videos up of me doing yajna. If you go to a Hindu temple, if you go to any sort of traditional Vedic sort of place, you'll see priests doing a ceremony in which there is the havan, there's an area that is square, in which it can be smaller, it can be bigger. Some of these can be massive to the point where, I mean truly massive. They can be 15 feet by 15 feet. Some of them can be very small, meaning 1 foot by 1 foot. But in any case, there is a sacred fire that is kindled, mantras are spoken, etc., and things are offered into the sacred yajna. This is what people experience. Now, interestingly, again, I need to go into this a little bit, because if I don't, as I've said, 99.9% of people don't understand these verses we're going to look at. Neither will you, unless I first give this preface. By the term yajna is certainly meant the most outward manifestation that I just described. But the term yajna also has implications and connotations that most people may not be aware of. First of all, yajna does not mean merely ritual. What yajna means is, interestingly, a process through which we offer and thus receive something beneficial, truly beneficial, spiritually and sattvically in return. That is yajna. Now, that being said, this is the reason why the traditional understanding of yajna throughout the Vedic scriptures have varied, but that has been the sacred thread that you see throughout, whatever is being spoken of, that we give of ourselves, sacrifice. Again, this is one of the translations. What is meant by sacrifice? We sacrifice of ourselves. You see a hero in a war, what do? They sacrifice themselves. So with that understanding, the idea is that we give of ourselves, we give of our abundance. But to whom do we give? We give to beneficent beings, we give to God, etc., such that then we will receive the blessings of God, of beneficent beings, etc. So it's an exchange that takes place. That is actually the meaning, the quote-unquote esoteric meaning of yajna. It is the spiritual meaning. It is the important meaning, the deepest meaning of the term yajna. It's for this reason, for example, that especially if you look at the Upanishads make a very important distinction. And you see this in the Upanishads, where most people, even in that time, in those days, meaning many thousands of years ago when the Upanishads were first written down, even back then, people had the more exterior understanding of yajna. That what does it mean? Oh, you do sacrifices, ritual, fire ritual, etc., in order to give to the gods so that you could receive the blessings of the gods. That was the common understanding even back then. But within the Upanishads, you see again and again and again the great rishis, the great, truly great gurus within the Upanishads explain that no, that is the external yajna. The true yajna happens within. The true yajna is something in which, no, you don't even necessarily have a fire ceremony going on, but meditation is true yajna. Giving to God within is true yajna. Karma yoga is true yajna. And again, they'll describe what is true yajna in many, many different ways, but all of which involve deep spiritual sadhana practice, such that we give of ourselves to the divine, to God, such that then the divine blesses us. But in this case, blesses us in what way? You see, again, keeping this in mind, the external yajna versus internal yajna. With the external yajna, that is actual fire ceremony that takes place, and there are many, 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 many different kinds of specific ceremonies that can take place in accordance with what it is you wish to accomplish with the yajna. Who is the being who you are propitiating, etc. The idea is that, oh yes, I want to have many, many children. Oh, I will do a yajna. I want to have wealth. I will do a yajna. I want to make sure that in my next life I am elevated when I am born again via reincarnation, such that, oh, I'm going to become a very powerful being, a very powerful God, etc. I will do yajna, etc. That's all the external. Those are the external manifestations of yajna. Now, when these great rishis in the Upanishads, but then other places as well, when they speak of yajna, what are they speaking about? Seemingly a similar process, except A, again, it's internal, B, it is for actual spiritual fulfillment, spiritual growth. Not just to have wealth, not just to have many children, lots of land, to have the blessings of the gods materially, but rather so that we can grow spiritually. So thus, yoga is yajna, meditation is yajna, Vedanta is yajna, etc., etc. So this is the idea, is that yajna is, interestingly, and again, all throughout, especially the Shruti literature, it describes that yajna is one of the foundations of reality within the material world. It's very interesting. Let me, in fact, talk about this for a moment. It explains how yajna is one of the foundations of materiality, of the material world. It explains that yajna is something that is primordial. In other words, when was the first yajna performed? so long ago that everything that we can think of as the world that we know around us was not even formed. So yajna is something that is truly primordial. It is foundational to the well-being of our world. This is another thing that's of great importance. It's not just something that has been here primordially, that's something that is universal, but more than this, it is something that is crucial for the very well-being of our very world itself. Without yajna, interestingly, our cosmos would fall apart. This is how foundational this is. So, with all this said, and what we're about to look at, because again, all these verses talk about yajna, but it's talking about yajna in the purest and the most primordial of forms that is unimaginable to us. So, indeed, as we go through these verses, you cannot think just of, oh, a person or a group of persons just having a fire, having things enter into the fire. Rather, you need to think of a process. You need to understand that this is a process that is so subtle, that is so cosmic in nature, that is so advanced, that for us to truly grasp what is being said would be similar to a mosquito trying to understand a computer. So all that being said, with these next verses, this process is explained to us via words. But to truly grasp what is understood by yajna in this context is almost impossible. We can try to approximate meaning. This also is why, again, getting back to what I was saying earlier, this is what also makes even translating Rig Veda very difficult today. Because people are looking at the words. Again, to truly understand, it's the equivalent of a mosquito trying to understand a computer. But all that being said, let us now dive into Purusha Sukta. So again, we're in the 10th mandala, the 90th verse, and now we're going to 90th chapter, and now we're going to do verse 6. When the devas, i.e. the demigods or the beings of light, performed a yajna, using the Purusha as the havis, the sacrificial material for the yajna, the Vasanta, that is spring, became the ajya, ghee, the actual ghee. The Grishma, summer, served as the idhma, the pieces of fuel. And the sharada, the autumn, filled the place of the havis, oblatory material, like the purodasha, or rice cake. Very good. So is that clear to everyone? All right, we're going to go on to the next verse now. So you see why, again, it's very difficult for people to understand what is taking place here. The reason why, in addition to everything that we've said, is because yajna is being described here in two different senses. That is, in the purely spiritual sense, that is, in the sense of consciousness itself, versus in a way that we can understand. When a yajna occurs, you have all of these instances. You have the sacred ritual itself, you have the sacrificial material, you have the pieces of fuel, you have the ghee, etc., etc. This is how you do a yajna on the one hand. On the other hand, what is actually being spoken of here is something that is much more subtle than all of these actual components of the yajna. Now, all that being said, we have to back up a little bit. When is this occurring? Now, this is crucial. This is something that's very important. So, what's being explained here is that the devas performed a yajna. And so far it says, oh, the Purusha, who we've been speaking about for several weeks now, is involved. And it explains how, this object corresponds to this aspect of the yajna. This corresponds to this aspect of the yajna, etc., etc. But there are several things that are left out here which are explained in other Vedic scriptures. That's how we know the details that are not explained here. So this is not made up, this is not speculation, this is not my opinion, etc. All the filler that is not here is explained in other Vedic scriptures. So first of all, when is this yajna occurring? It begins to hint at this. What are you going to say? No. It begins to hint at this a little bit later in preceding verses, but again, it makes it extremely clear in other scriptures. This occurs at a time when it speaks of the devas. Now, of course, most people, when they hear this word devas, what do they think of? Oh, they think of all the devas that are out there that they know, millions and millions of devas, of gods and goddesses, etc., all of whom are here now, etc. No. This is talking about a chronological strata of our cosmos that is so long ago, to the point where most of what we would even recognize as our cosmos and the reality contained therein did not even exist. This was a time before there was sun. This was a time before there was moon. This was a time before there was oxygen. This was a time when, we're talking about very early on, there is Brahma, there are the progenitor gods, and that's who it's referring to as the devas. Not just all the devas as they would be existing today in 2025. Indra did not exist. The king of the gods did not exist. So when it speaks of the devas, we're talking about a time when all that there was Brahma, the progenitor beings, and really the vast bulk of what we consider the cosmos has not yet even come into being. So we need to understand this. There were no trees. There were no humans. There was no Varna. Again, that's explained later. Later Varna is created. So we're talking about a time at the very beginning of cosmogony, of the creation of our cosmos. So what then are the two actual components within the cosmos? There is Brahma and that which surrounds Brahma in that highest of lokas within the material world. Satya Loka, there are many different names for it. Brahma Loka. There are the immediate progenitors, those beings who came directly from Brahma. There is what exists around them that they need for their purposes. And then there is Prakriti. But now, for Brahma, and with the help of the progenitors, that now that Brahma is about to create what we will recognize as a cosmos, now there must be the coming together of that Prakriti, of that prime materiality, with what? Consciousness itself, and not just individual consciousness, but that consciousness which necessarily has to inform Prakriti in such a way that as each element of materiality is created, God also, in the form of God's consciousness, is present every single stage throughout the creation, such that when eventually we have the full creation as we would recognize it, that is, we have the Triloka, the three planetary systems, etc., the three worlds within our world, and we have the gods, and we have the demons, and we have humans, etc., etc., etc. At that point, because of the presence of Prakriti informed as nama rupa, as name and form, as individual objects, but then interpenetrated by God himself, the Purusha, God himself, giving everything its ultimate stability and ability to even exist. Both of those coming together, that's what's being described here. All right. So we understand this so far? Yeah? Okay. Very good. All my students here are brilliant, so they're all going, yes, no problem. Yes, we get it. So that's very good. So that's what's being described here. So thus, again, when we speak of yajna in this context, are we talking about, again, what we would see even today, ritual that takes place with fire, etc., etc.? We could say that if you wished to detect it in that way, using material vision, you would see that. But in actuality, what's going on is something that is cosmic in nature and of the level of the primordial materiality, and the entering of Purusha within that primordial reality. That's what's actually occurring. Very nice. So, otherwise, the rest here is pretty self-explanatory. Now that we understand that, now we understand what's being said here. When the devas performed a yajna using the Purusha as the havis, as the sacrificial material for the yajna. Let's talk about that for a moment. because indeed this is something that people have speculated on for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. Everything from the most boring atheistic academicians to individuals who consider themselves practitioners to gurus, swamis, etc., etc. And indeed, there's always the misunderstanding that occurs here. And again, because they misunderstand the exterior versus the interior aspect of yajna, which the rishis explained, but for some reason, people now, for hundreds of years, can't understand, even though all the explanations have always been there in the Vedic scriptures, the great gurus, rishis, acharyas, etc. So what is actually occurring here is that the Purusha is now giving of himself, i.e., he is now overflowing within materiality such that the cosmos can be created. How was this done? How was this yajna done? So did the rishis sit around and literally do a fire yajna? In a way, yes. In a way, no. If we were to perceive, we would see the devas sitting around a yajna area and a fire being there, everything occurring. But interestingly, their motions would be so slow to the point where we would see no movement whatsoever to our eyes. Rather, what we would see would be these great devas in meditation. What is actually occurring is something that is on so subtle a level that, again, it is of the nature of consciousness. So, all this being understood, is it literally the case as a lot of atheist, very primitive thinking, actually, interestingly, very primitive thinking, atheistic academicians, the way they translate these verses is that, oh yes, the devas actually kind of captured God and they did some sort of human sacrifice with God himself, and then, oh, now here's the universe we can all enjoy. Again, I have a PhD in this. I've read all of the academic explanations of this, and I'm not exaggerating. Their understanding, that is the understanding of the professors, of the scholars, is so primitive that they think that this is what these verses are saying, quite literally. No, that's not the case. It is the case that what is yajna? Again, what does it mean? It means to sacrifice of oneself for something greater. Well, the idea is that God did the same thing. The Purusha also did the same thing. The Purusha gives of himself such that he will enter and interpenetrate all of material reality within a specific cosmos such that that cosmos can sustain its being, i.e. can have existence. So this is actually what's being described here. Very good. And then again, it gives all of these very, very nice explanations, which honestly we don't need to go through because again, it's just explaining what is the process of yajna. Instead, let us go now to the next verse, which is 10th Mandala, chapter 90, and now verse 7. Very good. For this yajna, there were 7 paridhis, that is, fuel pieces that were serving as the border, and 21 items were made of the samit, or sacrificial fuel sticks. When the devas were performing this yajna ceremony, they offered the Purusha himself as the pashu, as the offered being. And that ends the verse. So again, very nice. On the one hand, we see for the sake of manushya, of human beings, we see these explanations of what we would recognize as the elements of yajna. On the one hand. On the other hand, there's something infinitely greater and of cosmic scale that is occurring here. So again, we see all of these elements. So what are some of the elements of yajna? Oh, 7 paridhis, that is fuel pieces serving as the borders. What's meant by fuel pieces, I'll be very blunt with you, is either actual sacred pieces of wood or cow dung, but formed and dried. And 21 items were made the summit or sacrificial fuel sticks. So again, these are elements of the yajna. When the devas were performing this yajna ceremony, they offered the Purusha himself as the pashu. That's the word that's used, the offered being. So what is meant by this is that, again, Purusha himself, God himself, is called down to interpenetrate all of the reality that is to come. So again, we're talking about a time before the material cosmos was anything that we would recognize. Indeed, if a human being of today somehow could time travel, and time travel is not a possibility, but let's say, we're dealing with science fiction now. Let's say a human being today could travel back billions, and it would be billions of years. I forget how many, I used to know. Be several billion years to this time, right as the universe is beginning to be formed. If a human being of today, with our present conditions, let's say the typical human being, 6 feet tall, 170 pounds, etc., looking like a human being of 2025, were to go back to this time period, they could not exist because there's literally not even oxygen. There's nothing that we would recognize. What they would be in would be a realm in which there is a very small realm that is informed, that is Brahmaloka, but then the rest would be primal matter itself. So they wouldn't be able to exist. But again, as I explained previously, as that primordial matter, that prime matter, begins to be informed with nama and rupa, name and form, name and form. Oh, now you have a wheel, now you have a cart, now you have this, there's a house, there's a planet, there's a tree, etc., etc. As each element comes into being, it is the Purusha himself who is quote-unquote sacrificing, i.e. giving of himself, in order to then enter all of these aspects of materiality, simultaneous with their creation, necessarily so. Because it is God himself as the Purusha, as the element of consciousness behind all things, giving everything its very basis of existence. And this is how a universe, a cosmos, a Brahmanda is formed, little by little by little. So this is why behind all things that are perceptual or conceptual, what is there ultimately? There is God. There is God, there is God. Behind our very body, there is God. Oh, we don't even have a body? Somehow we're existing in the material world, but we're purely atmic? Behind even our Atman is God. Aham Brahmasmi. What am I? Oh, what is behind me? What is my sustainer? Is Brahman, is God, etc. So that is what's being explained here. Let's go on to the very last verse that we're going to look at for today. And the reason why is because, this is one section, and with the next time we get together, we're going to be starting with a new section of the Purusha Sukta. So now this is verse 8. The devas, the sadhyas, that is personifications of the rituals and hymns of the Vedas, and the rishis performed the sacrifice by using that Purusha as the means of yajna. The Purusha who had been born in the beginning after sprinkling him with water by the barhis, the sacrificial grass. Very nice. So again, this is continuing with the idea of yajna. So again, these are more elements. There is water, there is the what's called barhis, the sacrificial grass, in which you have sacrificial grass and you make it wet with sacred waters, and you can bless people, you can bless things, you can even bless the area that you're doing the sacrifice in before you do the actual sacrifice. So again, all of these various elements of the external yajna are being described, but really what is occurring is something which, if we were to perceive, it would be an impossibility to fully grasp, because we would be attempting, with what we are now and our perceptual ability, we would be attempting to understand something, the ontological nature of which and the perceptual nature of which is so different that we would not be able to conceive. We would be experiencing something which in itself is beyond our grasp. So to fully understand today, in our present state as human beings in the Kali Yuga of 2025, it is impossible. Not unless we become liberated beings. Then we can fully grasp the experience. But let's go through this. Three different sets of beings are described here. The devas, so again, the gods. What is meant by the gods? Again, the gods who I've mentioned. The primordial gods. These are the first of all beings. These are the progenitors. Not even gods who we would recognize today. Again, not here, but later on in verses that we're going to look at, it explains that even Indra did not exist. Even the gods who we know of today did not exist. Even the sun, even the moon, even trees, even air did not exist. So this is what we're talking about. Those highest and very first and most powerful, most exalted of devas. So the devas, number one. Number two, the sadhyas. The sadhya. What is a sadhya? A sadhya is a class of beings. Are they devas? Yes, but really they are a separate class of beings. And they are the personifications of the Vedas themselves. Personifications of the ritual that takes place, the actual yajna. They personify ritual, but they also personify the power of ritual, and they personify the actual hymns of the Vedas that are used in the ritual, in the yajna. These are the sadhyas. These are a category of divine beings that even people who are very conversant with Sanatana Dharma probably have not heard of. There are so many interesting classifications of divine beings. So again, these are not even devas. They are the devas and they're the sadhyas. They serve a different purpose, centering around yajna and the hymns that are necessary for yajna. And that being said, and the rishis. And we know what the rishis are. The rishis are beings who are transparent via mediums. You turn to these beings when you want to understand something that is of the nature of pure transcendence. Now, I said everything happening here was at a time before they were even humans. Correct? You remember me saying that, right? All this that is occurring here, there weren't even humans. There were not Manusya. There was not even Manu, what to speak of Manusya. So all this being the case, how could there be rishis? I'm playing a little bit of Asura's advocate. There were no humans, but there were rishis. What's the conclusion that we come to with this? Not all rishis are human. And truthfully, the Vedas talk about this. There are devas who are rishis as well. Who is the foremost of these beings, of these people? And indeed, a direct, literal son of Brahma. Narada Muni. What is another name for him? Devarshi. He is a rishi among the devas. So when we hear this term rishi here, don't think of humans whose names you have read in Mahabharata or someplace. No, these are rishis who are not of the category of human. To even be a rishi, what does this mean? It means that you are I'll state this very simply for people to understand. You are in absolute direct contact with God. You are in absolute direct contact with God. That's what it means to be a rishi. And when we talk about these beings who are not just devas, not just sadhyas, but indeed individuals who are of the highest class of beings available within the material universe, but also they are in complete concert with God. So these are the rishis that are being spoken of here. Rishis, the types of which are difficult for us to even understand. A human rishi is difficult for 99.999% of people to understand. Again, that's why I had to write an entire book about this called The Vedic Way of Knowing God. The Vedic Way of Knowing God, which was my PhD dissertation, does many things. It is primarily about epistemology, but as part of that project of explaining what is Vedic epistemology, i.e., again, how do we know God? What are the technical necessities that must be there in order for us to perceive, to understand what is the nature of God? As part of that, I explain the nature of the rishi, generally speaking. To even understand a human being who becomes a rishi is very difficult for the vast majority of people. To then understand a rishi who is of the nature of a being who is so exalted, so advanced, that they were among the first beings who were here at the very beginning of creation, we cannot understand these beings unless we become like them, which would take so much effort, it is almost impossible to even conceive. But these three sets of beings, the devas, sadhyas, and the rishis, performed this yajna by using that Purusha as the means. So again, as these progenitor beings, the very first beings in this universe, whether they're sadhyas, whether they're devas, whether they are these truly exalted rishis that live only among the devas themselves, as they are creating the universe as a subset of creators under Brahma, under what to use Platonic language and Gnostic would be called the demiurge, as they are helping to create our cosmos bit by bit by bit by bit. They are literally creating the material aspect of every aspect of this universe, but it is the Purusha who is entering, and giving every aspect of materiality its very basis of existence. That is what is being described here in the Purusha Sukta. Very good. So with that, again, we're going to stop here for now. And when we get together the next time that we do indeed talk about the Purusha Sukta, we will be continuing with this idea of yajna. Because again, this is a longer section, very well-known section, very important section, very almost always misinterpreted section of the Purusha Sukta. But we will continue as it continues to talk about this process of yajna, of this primordial yajna. Now, so far the process itself has been explained. And when we get back to this, what we're going to be talking about is what are the resultant effects of this yajna that takes place. And then it becomes especially interesting and more overtly philosophical in content. The truth of the matter is, of course, this is all philosophical, and of course, what? If you understand it the authentic way. Because a person can look at this, and trust me, thousands have, look at this and just kind of get bored. What? Okay, the sacrificial grass did something? I don't know. It seems not philosophical. But the way that we understand it and explain it, of course, is in accordance with Vedic authenticity. And thus we understand that every verse is permeated with the deepest meaning. The deepest meaning. So that being the case, we're going to stop here for now because I do want to leave a nice amount of time for questions and answers. Let me just say this, however, something quite important. I am thinking that the next time we get together, because we have not had time to do this in a few months, I believe. Next time we get together, that is next Sunday, we're going to take just a 1-week break from the Purusha Sukta, and we're going to have a 100% Q&A session, because again, we have not done that in quite some time. And it's important because whenever we do that, oh my Lord, people are very happy, and they start to share all the questions that they've been accumulating all throughout this time. So next Sunday we will have a 100% Q&A. After that, we will resume with the Purusha Sukta, and we will continue with where we left off, as starting with verse 9. So with that, again, everyone, I thank you very much for listening to my discourse on these verses of the Purusha Sukta. And with that, if there are any sincere questions that anyone has, either about the Purusha Sukta or any aspect of Sanatana Dharma whatsoever, philosophical questions, practical questions, even just about your own life, just, oh, I'm experiencing this, what should I do about it, any sort of advice. So all that being said, it would be my pleasure to answer any sincere questions. Good. Here is a very nice question, actually. This is quite good, and I will definitely answer this. And it is, Namaste Sri Acharyaji, and thank you for always spreading Dharma in the world. Thank you so much for saying that. I would like to ask, are the Prajapatis you mentioned the same as the ancestors of Pitaraloka? That is an excellent question. There's no connection between the two. There theoretically could be, but for the vast majority of instances, of cases, no, there's no connection between the two. The Pitras, the actual ancestors, are individuals who were humans at one time. In fact, let me not even just say that. Let me back up. If you are a human, see, all beings have ancestors. The devas have ancestors. The asuras have ancestors. But if you're human very specifically, then we're talking about those beings who pre-existed us, who existed on Earth as also human beings. We could be talking about our grandparents, great-great-great-great-parents, and then going on and on and on like that, stretching all the way back to the beginning. But no, these are individuals who were tied to us as Manushyas, who passed away, who were good beings, who were very virtuous beings, who then transferred to what is called Pitraloka, that is the realm of the ancestors, and who we can propitiate, and who can be of great inspiration to us, who can help us, etc., and who remain part of our family, but part of our family chronologically, i.e. through time. You know, it's very interesting. When we speak of family, of course, what do we tend to speak about? Those individuals who are alive right now, who are part of our family, who share our DNA, who share our blood, etc., but who are alive now. We've met them. Oh, maybe we haven't even met them, but we know, oh yes, I have an Uncle Joe somewhere 5 states away, and never met him, but I know he exists. But we tend to think of individuals who are either alive now or, oh, maybe they did pass away 20 years ago, but, you know, we did meet them, a grandmother, great-grandmother. But when we talk about the ancestors, we're talking about beings who also were part of our family. So indeed, maybe great-great-great-grandparents, and you can just continue adding greats onto that, stretching back hundreds, even thousands of years. They are also part of our family. And this is something that was recognized by all intelligent and civilized humans up until now. Now we're animals. Now we have separated ourselves from the majority of our family, i.e. those family members who have moved on. In the past, people were intelligent, and they understood, oh, just because we have family members who have moved on, they're still family. They're still part of our family. And people had that civilized understanding. So they would propitiate someone who, oh, they were part of your family. Maybe they lived 2,000 years ago, 500 years ago, but they're still part of your family. And this being the case, of course, what do? Well, we also give offerings unto them. What's interesting? This is what is so interesting about this, is that, again, yajna. How did I explain what yajna is? It is sacrificing of oneself to a higher being such that they then bestow benedictions upon us. We do this even with the ancestors. We do ancestor puja. We offer what's called pinda. You make beautiful little rice balls and you offer them to the ancestors very specifically. And it's with the idea that we will have the blessings of the ancestors. So similar to what we do with the devas, similar to what we do with, again, any powerful, beneficent being. You do a yajna unto them such that they will then shower their blessings unto you. So that's what the Pitras are. Those are the ancestors. The Prajapatis are completely different beings. These are beings who, again, I've been speaking about them. This is what is generally described in these verses as the devas, but it's understood, again, in other scriptures. It makes it very clear. This is not open. This is not speculation. Nothing in Sanatana Dharma. Let's pause here. Nothing in Sanatana Dharma is open to speculation. Nothing. If you come from any so-called tradition, let's say you're a spiritual follower of Sanatana Dharma, if you come from some so-called tradition that in the smallest way gives you the impression that things in the Vedic scriptures are just open to interpretation, leave that tradition now. Leave that so-called tradition. It's not a tradition. Leave that sect, cult, whatever it is. Leave it. Leave it now. And you don't even have to follow the ISTS. Follow anything where they'll tell you the opposite. They'll tell you the truth, that nothing in the Vedic scriptures is open to interpretation. So indeed, we understand that what is meant by the devas here are the Prajapatis, because it says so in the other Vedic scriptures. That is the very first primordial beings who came from Brahma, whose task, whose role, whose job, whose duty it was to then create the material world. And what does that mean? That means all the material objects, but also the living beings, the various lineages of various species and races of beings, of human beings who are upon the earth. So this is what's being spoken of. There's no connection between the two. Now the next one is a funny question, and I'll answer this despite the fact that it's funny. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's funny to me, actually. But let me make this clear. I will answer this question definitively. In other words, what I'm about to give you is the answer beyond which there is no other answer. Indeed, anything other than what I'm about to tell you would be rampant speculation, if not lies. So let me read the question and I'll give you the answer. Namaste, Sri Acharyaji. Why are the Aghoris so weird? Because they're irrelevant. They have always been irrelevant. You see, I've spoken about this in various contexts when speaking about the history of Sanatana Dharma. When I say history, of course, I mean especially in the last, several thousand years. Previous to that history, historical methodology was of zero importance. And that is that when it comes to, indeed, what you actually correctly say, when it comes to the weirder aspects that you find within the Hindu milieu, those things several hundred years ago were considered to be so rare, indeed so weird, even by followers of Sanatana Dharma, that they were rarely, if ever even spoken about. They were considered to be the fringe of the fringe of the fringe of the fringe, to the point where they're not really spoken about much at all. If they are, they're looked down upon in the Vedic scriptures. These are things which celebrated, truly authentic gurus, acharyas, etc., themselves rarely, if ever, address. Indeed, you can read every single work written, every single word written by Ramanuja Acharya. He doesn't mention the Aghoris. None of them do. None of the great acharyas, none of the great gurus, none of the great philosophers, none of the great yogi adepts, etc., 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 speak about the Aghoris. It has been within the context of the 20th century, and now, of course, we're in the 21st century. We're 25 years, we're a quarter into the 21st century, that people whose minds are sadly in the gutters of the Kali Yuga find these fringe things fascinating. Who are the Aghoris? These are the left-hand path, satanic, and I can go on, but I'd probably be thrown off YouTube, even though I'm telling the truth. I can't even describe how degenerate these individuals are. Have they always been there? Oh, they've always been there. But again, they were considered to be so fringe of a fringe of a fringe of a fringe of an element. And there were so few of them that up until recently, they were never even spoken about until the 20th century. It was denizens of the industrialized modern West who started to talk about these things because they found it titillating. You know, people from the UK, people from Germany, Americans who started to discover things about India and Hinduism, and they themselves became titillated by all these weirdnesses. They're the ones who brought this to the fore and pushed it in people's faces. Oh, look at this, look at this. There's this weird sect called the Aghoris, and they literally engage in cannibalism. Previous to, again, recent days, this was not even considered to be a part of Sanatana Dharma, to the point where it was not ever even discussed. These are the left-hand path Satanists of Sanatana Dharma. So you ask, again, in a very simple but very nice way, why are the Aghoris so weird? That's why. They're irrelevant. They're crazy people. They're Satanists. Such people exist universally. Whatever is the religion, you'll have always a tiny minority of people who are perverts. And they'll take the religion and they'll try to twist it. For example, even in the West, what is Satanism? It's the dark side of Christianity. They take Christianity and what do? Literally invert it. They invert the cross. They invert everything. They invert the Mass into a satanic Mass. Well, you've had this in Sanatana Dharma. You've had this in Buddhism. Oh, you have this in Islam. Oh, you have this in Judaism. So, in the case of Sanatana Dharma, that same phenomena of left-hand degenerate perversion is called Aghori. So I hope that answers the question for you. Thank you for the question. Give me a moment, please, as I look at the rest of these questions. Very good. I'm not going to answer this question, and not for any bad reason. I'll even explain why. It's the question about Ganesh, misspelled, there's an A on the end, Ganesha. Whether Ganesha is a Puranic tantric development, blah, 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 blah. That is an academic question. It's not a spiritual question. We don't accept any of this. This is all nonsense. We accept that the Puranas, the Tantras, the Dharma Shastras, the Sutra literature, that all the various genre of literature are just as sacred as the four Veda Samhitas. And this is all recent speculation, meaning going back to the 19th century, that has nothing to do with Sanatana Dharma, that has nothing to do with spiritual advancement, that has nothing to do with knowing God. We reject it all. We reject all of this atheistic speculation. Sanatana Dharma did not evolve and change and evolve in accordance with crass human needs. That's Marxism. That's Marxism translated into academia, and then through whose perverted lens people have tried to peer at Sanatana Dharma with a perverted understanding. So, yeah, we don't accept any of this. So I hope that answers as far as why. But with that, let me see if there are any other questions here. Let me see. I believe I have another question from the same person who asked about Prajapatis versus the Pitras. And this may have been part 2 that I didn't see. And is there any particular reason why it's so far away from Goloka? Again, I'm not quite sure what you're referring to. If you're referring to Pitara Loka is within the material realm. It is an actual place, a geographic location within the material realm, whereas Goloka, if by Goloka you mean Goloka Vrindavana, within Vaikuntha, this is within the spiritual realm, which transcends anything material. So I hope that answers the question. I'm not quite sure if that's what you meant, but I hope it is. Very good. Let me see if there are any other questions that are here. Very nice. There are a few. Oh, as I say that, of course, the screen shifts, so the questions disappeared. Here we go. Here's a very practical question, as practical as it gets. So I'm going to take a moment and answer this because I can see it was asked very sincerely. And it is, Namaste Acharyaji. I have been trying to join the ISDS. I sent in a donation and sent emails about joining. Should I mail a $120 for the year to get started? I watch your channel every day. Well, thank you for that very practical question. To become a member is pretty simple, actually. Quite literally, all you need to do is you go to the website dharmacentral.com. If you look on the menu, you'll see that there's donations on the menu. There's a specific place where you go, you can give donations, or you become a member. That's how you become a member of the ISDS. You set up automatic payments, and indeed what it means to be a member is you become a tithing member, a monthly tithing member. You can choose an amount that you want to donate each and every month. As I always say, kind of jokingly, but at the same time not, you can donate $5, $50, $500, $5,000, $5 million per month, whatever it is that's within your means. And that's how you become a member of the ISDS. It's quite literally that simple. Once that's the case, then you are placed on a very special list of what is called our well-wishers. And periodically you'll receive email messages meant specifically for well-wishers. Once in a while we have special Q&As that are meant specifically for our members / well-wishers, etc. So that's how you become a member of the ISDS. It's actually that simple. If for some reason you don't have the ability to start those payments online, you don't have a credit card or something like that, then certainly if you wish, you can certainly send a check or a money order directly to the ISDS, to our physical address. And as long as we have your information along with that amount, then we will put you down as a member of the ISDS. So it's literally that simple. You can either go online and join in that way by going to dharmacentral.com. If for some reason, you don't have a bank account or something for whatever reason, you can certainly send either check or money order directly to our address. But thank you for asking that. Very good. I'll answer this very quickly because I'm not sure if it's a serious question or what, but I'll still answer it nonetheless. Namaste Acharyaji, I am a bit concerned as a Westerner seeing how Indian Hindus would marry girls so young. Prabhupada as an example. Is this morally justified? Can you explain this? I'll explain this very quickly, succinctly, but again, definitively. No, we are meant to follow all the laws of whatever specific nation that we're living in. First of all, as far as marrying young, this is not an Indian Hindu thing. Again, it's like caste. This is not an Indian Hindu thing. This has nothing to do with Sanatana Dharma. Please keep in mind, 150 years ago, in America, as individuals were pioneering the West. Sometimes we would have people getting married as young as 13. And I'm talking about in Utah, in Oklahoma. I'm talking about in the state of Washington, et cetera, et cetera. So this is not something that Indian Hindus do. This is something that was universal. So you need to, always understand these things. Things that we want to ascribe to Indian Hindus were also done by Europeans, were also done by Africans, were also done by fill in the blank. So this is not some Indian Hindu thing, number one. Number two, in the ISDS, and indeed as far as contemporary Sanatana Dharma today, this is not something that's accepted. In Sanatana Dharma, people are expected to get married when they are legally capable of doing so. So in many states in America, for example, that means 18. I myself have never met a human being in my life who got married at the age of 13, 14, 15. I'm older than you probably. I'm 61 years old. I've never met a human being in Sanatana Dharma, outside of Sanatana Dharma, who got married when they were 13. This is not a concern. In Sanatana Dharma, we don't practice this, especially in the International Sanatana Dharma Society. So that's the explanation. Very good. Oh, very good. Here's a follow-up. Yes, I meant why Pitraloka is so far away from Goloka. Yes, indeed, that is the answer. Pitraloka is within the realm of the material world. Goloka Vrindavana, is in Vaikuntha, which transcends materiality altogether. Very good. Very nice. Very good. Yes, here is a good question. This is the last question I'm going to take for today, only because we've gone past an hour now, and I don't want to keep people for too long. But indeed, this is the last question that I will answer, and it's a nice one. Sri Acharyaji, can you please comment if it is allowed to do pujas in other religious rituals in one's own cultural clothing? In my case, Western clothing like a suit. ISKCON does not allow it. Yes. Very nice. Let me answer this definitively. Yes, it is perfectly fine to wear proper, sattvic, dignified, appropriate clothing when doing puja. It does not have to be dhoti and kurta. Does not have to be a sari. I've explained this before in other contexts when it comes to clothing and, let's say, ethnic expressions of culture. Indeed, a lot of people have this idea, and it's very unfortunate, to this day people have this idea, that what it means for, let's say, non-Indians to become followers of Sanatana Dharma is that, oh, you are now becoming Indian. That is not what it means in any way whatsoever. On the contrary, what it means to become a follower of Sanatana Dharma is that you are now accepting the philosophy, the actual spiritual practices of Sanatana Dharma, and the lifestyle of Sanatana Dharma. That being said, whatever is your ethnic cultural heritage you must retain and respect. So that means if you're European, and pick any nation in Europe, from Sweden to Malta, from Ireland to Russia, whatever is your specific culture, as long as it's not contrary to Sanatana Dharma. So a person can say, well, it's part of my culture to eat pork all the time, to eat beef all the time, etc. No, that has to be thrown out. You must be vegetarian. So other than the obvious things, oh, it's part of my culture that we just get drunk all the time. No, you need to leave that behind. But when it comes to the sattvic elements of your own ethnic culture, i.e., those vegetarian foodstuffs that are part of your culture. So, for example, I'm Italian. There are so many vegetarian dishes that are available in Italy, it's amazing. That I can retain. Language, you should retain your language. For that matter, clothing as well. I've said this to a few people. I don't say this very often. But in the golden age that is about to come, very interestingly, you talk about Western clothing. Modern clothing that we wear in the West is not Western clothing. In the golden age that is about to come, I've actually told a few people this, it would be beautiful if, and this is what will occur, if people were to begin dressing in truly their traditional ethnic clothing. You know, when people get together now and they'll have, a Scottish festival, a Polish festival, an Italian festival, a Hungarian festival, a Russian festival, a Bavarian festival, and you'll see people come out in their truly traditional clothing, the way that people from those areas dressed hundreds of years ago, and they'll do a nice dance. That's the only time you see those clothing now. And the truth of the matter is, that is how people dressed at one time, hundreds of years ago. In the future, it is my hope that that will become the norm again. That jeans and a t-shirt and a backwards baseball cap will be thrown into a fire, into the garbage where they belong, and that instead, Polish people will begin dressing beautifully the way Polish people dressed 300 years ago, 400 years ago. And the same with Sicilians, and the same with Swedes, and the same with Norwegians, etc. That people, if anything, will go back to truly traditional clothing. And that will be the norm again. Now, all that being said, let's say, and just to pick anything at random, let's say you're Polish and you've fully embraced, again, the good aspects of your culture, not the kielbasa, for people who know what that is. That's Polish sausage. No, that's out. But again, if you fully embrace as a Polish person all the good sattvic aspects of your culture, and you're dressed, let's say as a woman, in a beautiful dress with beautiful embroidery, or let's say you're dressed as a man, and again, the way Polish people used to dress hundreds of years ago, with beautiful clothes and a vest, a beautiful hat, etc., and you wanted to do puja, you would be welcome to do so wearing that dress. You would not have to dress in kurta. On the contrary, as long as you're dressed in a beautiful, dignified way, which even what you're wearing is a celebration of God. People must be allowed to be who they are as far as their ethnic heritage, their specific culture, etc. In the future, when we are living in a Vedic golden age, Italians will still be eating pasta, and etc. You can imagine all the differences. Greek people will still be eating hummus, etc., etc. People will be eating their foods that they know. Vegetarian, yes, it has to be vegetarian, but they'll be eating the foods they know. They'll be dressed in the ways of their ancestors, getting back to ancestors, etc., etc. You ask them, what is your nationality? You're not going to have some white Swede who's practicing Sanatana Dharma. Oh, what is your nationality? I think I'm Indian. No, you're Swede. You're not Indian. You're Swedish. You're Norwegian. You're Finnish. You're Hungarian. You're Australian, etc., etc., etc. But you are a follower of Sanatana Dharma, and you are all, regardless of your ethnicity and how you are dressed, you are all offering puja to Sriman Narayana. So that's the ideal. That's the ideal. That's the ideal. So, good place to end. Very nice. With that, indeed, we will end here for today. Again, as I mentioned, the next time we get together, we're going to have Q&A where for a full hour, I'm not going to give a talk. Instead, we're just going to have questions from the audience and then answers to those questions. So please join us again next time. Before we leave, I just have to mention several things. And that is, again, I need to mention our Discord server. If and only if, that's a very nice philosophical statement, if and only if you are an individual who is a sincere spiritual seeker. That is, no, you're not coming to show off what you think you know. No, you're not coming to do religious comparison because, that's how you get your giggles. No. If you're an individual who you want to know God, you don't want to play games. You understand that this is a realm of suffering. You understand that you know nothing, and you understand that you now have come to the point where you want to know God. And not just quote unquote philosophically, not just because, oh, it's interesting. It's an interesting topic. No. If you're on fire, if you are sincere, if you sometimes find yourself at moments when you are alone and sometimes tears come to your eyes because you so much yearn to know God and to live a life of full meaning, join the International Sanatana Dharma Society. Join our Discord server, first and foremost, because when you do that, what you will be doing is joining essentially a discussion forum that goes on 24/7 of serious followers of the International Sanatana Dharma Society. Come there to humbly ask questions. Come there to learn. Come there for companionship, good companionship, true companionship, people who you can trust, people who are good, people who are like you. They're also on fire to just know, what is this? What is this world about? I need to know. In all humility, please God, help me. I want to know, who are you? You know, like that beautiful song by George Harrison, My Sweet Lord. The lyrics to that song are basically the words of a soul yearning for God. Listen to that song again when you have a chance, My Sweet Lord. If you have that approach, trust me, all the serious members of the ISDS also approached in that way. They wanted to truly know, God, where are you? Who are you? I must know you. If that's you, please join our Discord server and you will be happy to meet hundreds of other individuals who are the same way. No games. No games. No academic games. No speculation, no curiosity, no, oh, let me see if I can one-up this person philosophically in a debate. No games. Gone. Join our Discord server, and you will be among sincere seekers who just want to know God. The other thing, please visit our website, dharmacentral.com, as I mentioned to the other person who was talking about donations. You can certainly purchase our books that are there. You can indeed give a donation to the ISDS. As I keep mentioning to people, people think this is a YouTube channel. The YouTube channel is, 1% of what we are. We actually have a movement. It's a literal nonprofit tax-exempt 501c3. It's a religious movement known as the International Sanatana Dharma Society. If you can, please help us. Please donate, even a one-time donation of however much you can, reasonably and comfortably. We never ask people to donate to the ISDS if it takes food out of their mouth or something crazy like that. No. If you can give $5, whatever you can give, $1. We've had donations of $1. And let me tell you something, it doesn't happen all the time. But whenever I see, oh, that's interesting, a donation for $1, that actually moves me when I see that. Because in my mind, I'm thinking, this is someone who has probably very little, and yet they were so sincere, they decided to give $1 of what little they had. That's what I think of whenever I see such a thing. But please, if you can, give a donation. If you can't, please don't worry about it. And again, as I mentioned, if you would like to become a monthly tithing member of the ISDS, you can also do that on Dharma Central. But with that, again, everyone, we will stop here for now. I truly thank you for being here. Please join us again next time. And Namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana. And everyone, I leave you with these words of Bhagavan Sri Krishna from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 66, wherein he says in the Sanskrita, Ma Shuchaha. Do not fear. Do not fear. Do not fear. Do not give the demons their fuel. They live on fear. They live on lies. They live on illusion. They live on fantasy. Do not fear, because understand that the reality is, if you are a devotee, oh, you have nothing to fear. Nothing. Lose all fear. And your life will be beautiful. Everyone, please take care.